8-year-old Emma Williams sat by her hospital window, watching the world outside through tired eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. Her golden hair, once thick and curly, now lay thin against the white pillowcase. The cancer had taken so much from her, but it couldn't take away her gentle smile or the spark of curiosity that still danced in her bright blue eyes. Emma's parents, Sarah and Michael, had been by her side for months now, watching their little girl fight a battle no child should ever have to face. The doctors had delivered the heartbreaking news 3 weeks ago. There was nothing more they could do. Emma had perhaps a few weeks left, maybe a month if they were lucky. The family had cried together, holding each other tight, but Emma had surprised them all with her peaceful acceptance. "Mummy," Emma whispered one afternoon as her mother adjusted her blankets, "I want to see the palace guards before I go to heaven." Sarah's heart nearly broke at her daughter's innocent request. Emma had always been fascinated by fairy tales and stories about castles and brave knights. She had dozens of picture books about princesses and royal guards, and she would spend hours imagining herself in those magical places. The request seemed impossible. They lived in a small town hundreds of miles from London, and Emma was far too weak to travel. The medical equipment keeping her comfortable couldn't be moved, and even a short car ride would be too much for her fragile body. Sarah exchanged a worried glance with Michael, both parents struggling to find words that wouldn't crush their daughter's final wish. "Sweetheart," Michael said gently, kneeling beside her bed, "the palace is very far away, and the doctors say you need to stay here where they can take care of you." Emma nodded slowly, understanding filling her young face. She had grown wise beyond her years through her illness, learning to accept disappointments with grace that amazed the adults around her. But Sarah couldn't bear to see the slight sadness in Emma's eyes. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, Sarah sat at her laptop in the hospital family room typing frantically. She searched for contact information, wrote emails, and made phone calls. She reached out to local newspapers, social media groups, and anyone who might listen. Her message was simple but desperate. Her dying daughter wanted to see palace guards, and she was willing to try anything to make it happen. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Sarah's email had been shared hundreds of times. Local news stations picked up the story, and soon it was spreading across the country. People were moved by Emma's simple wish and her family's love. Comments poured in from strangers offering support, prayers, and suggestions. Emma's story touched hearts everywhere. A retired soldier who had once served as a ceremonial guard at the palace shared the story with his old military contacts. A journalist who covered royal events forwarded it to her colleagues. A teacher who had read the story to her class watched as her students organized a fundraiser. The power of social media turned Emma's quiet hospital room into the center of a growing wave of compassion. By the third day, Sarah's phone was ringing constantly. Local officials, military representatives, and even members of parliament had heard Emma's story. The mayor of their small town called personally, asking how the community could help. A local businessman offered to charter a helicopter if transport could somehow be arranged safely. But the most surprising call came on Thursday morning. A woman with a crisp British accent introduced herself as a representative from the royal household. She had seen Emma's story and wanted to discuss possibilities. Sarah could barely speak as she listened to the woman explain that Emma's wish had reached some very important people who were eager to help make magic happen for a brave little girl. Emma noticed her parents whispering more frequently and saw the excited glances they shared when they thought she wasn't looking. Something was happening, something that made her mother's eyes sparkle with hope for the first time in weeks. When Sarah sat beside her bed that evening, Emma could sense the change in the air. "Mummy, are you planning something?" Emma asked with a small smile. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead and smoothed her thin hair. "We're trying very hard to make your wish come true, sweetheart. There are many kind people who want to help us." Emma's eyes widened with wonder, and for a moment she looked like the healthy, excited child she had been before the illness changed everything. The hospital corridors buzzed with unusual activity as news crews and reporters gathered outside Emma's ward. Dr. Patricia Reynolds, Emma's oncologist, had never seen anything like it in her 20 years of practice. The story of the brave little girl who wanted to see palace guards had captured the nation's attention, and now everyone wanted to help make her dream come true. Inside Emma's room, the family received visitor after visitor, The hospital had to assign extra security to manage the flow of people wanting to meet Emma and offer their support. Flowers, cards, and gifts poured in from across the country. A group of schoolchildren from Manchester had made a giant get-well card covered in drawings of castles and guards. A local bakery sent Emma's favorite chocolate cupcakes every day. The most significant development came when Colonel James Harrison, a distinguished officer from the Queen's Guard, arrived at the hospital in full dress uniform. Emma's eyes grew wide as she saw the tall man in his red coat and black bearskin hat standing in her doorway. His presence seemed to fill the room with authority and kindness. "Miss Emma Williams," Colonel Harrison said formally, bowing slightly, "I have come to personally extend an invitation from Her Majesty's Guard." Emma could barely breathe as she listened. Her parents stood nearby, tears streaming down their faces as they watched their daughter's face light up with pure joy. Colonel Harrison explained that arrangements were being made for something unprecedented. Since Emma couldn't travel to see the guards at the palace, they were going to bring the palace guards to her. A special ceremony would be organized right there at the hospital, complete with the changing of the guard, military music, and full ceremonial dress. Emma would witness a royal ceremony created just for her. The logistics were extraordinary. Military personnel worked around the clock to coordinate transportation, uniforms, and ceremonial equipment. The hospital administration cleared the main courtyard and worked with city officials to manage crowd control. Local police volunteered their time to ensure everything ran smoothly. The entire community seemed to rally around Emma's wish. Word reached the highest levels of the royal household. Palace officials, moved by Emma's story, gave their full blessing to the unprecedented ceremony. They sent along special items that would make the event even more magical. A ceremonial sword that had been used in royal ceremonies, official photographs signed by members of the royal family, and a special letter of recognition for Emma's courage. As preparations intensified, Emma's condition remained stable but fragile. Dr. Reynolds worked closely with the military planners to ensure everything would be safe for Emma. Special medical equipment was arranged to be on standby during the ceremony. A private viewing area was set up where Emma could watch comfortably without being overwhelmed by crowds. Emma spent her days asking endless questions about what would happen. She wanted to know about the guards' uniforms, their duties, and the history of their service. The hospital librarian brought her books about the Royal Guard, and Emma studied them like she was preparing for the most important test of her life. Her excitement gave her energy that surprised everyone, including her doctors. The media attention grew beyond anything the family had expected. International news outlets picked up the story. Messages of support arrived from around the world. A famous children's author sent Emma a personalized storybook about a brave princess who became friends with palace guards. A popular singer recorded a special song for Emma about courage and dreams coming true. But the most touching responses came from ordinary people. Veterans wrote letters sharing their own military experiences. Children from schools across the country sent drawings and messages. Families dealing with their own medical challenges reached out to offer support and share their stories. Emma's wish had created a wave of kindness that touched thousands of lives. Sarah and Michael found themselves overwhelmed by the generosity and love surrounding their daughter. Complete strangers had become friends, working tirelessly to make Emma's dream possible. The hospital staff, initially concerned about the disruption, became enthusiastic supporters as they saw how the preparations lifted Emma's spirits and brought joy to other young patients as well. 3 days before the ceremony, Emma asked her mother a question that brought everyone to tears. "Mummy, when I get to heaven, will I be able to tell the angels about the brave guards who came to see me?" Sarah held her daughter close, marveling at the child's faith and the peace she had found. This wasn't just about seeing palace guards anymore. It had become about creating a moment of pure magic in the midst of heartbreak. The morning of the ceremony dawned crisp and clear, as if the weather itself wanted to cooperate with Emma's special day. By sunrise, military vehicles had begun arriving at the hospital, carrying uniformed guards who moved with precision and purpose. The courtyard transformed into something magical, as red carpets were rolled out and ceremonial barriers were carefully positioned. Emma woke early, more alert and excited than she had been in months. The nurses had prepared a special breakfast for her, complete with tiny British flags decorating her tray. She wore her favorite pink dress, the one with sparkly buttons that her grandmother had given her for her birthday. Sarah had managed to style Emma's thin hair with a small tiara headband, making her look every bit like the princess she had always dreamed of being. Hospital staff members found themselves caught up in the excitement. Doctors and nurses who weren't on duty came in early just to witness the historic event. Even the usually serious hospital administrator was spotted with tears in his eyes as he watched the final preparations. The children's ward had been transformed, with balloons and banners created by young patients who were too sick to attend but wanted to contribute to Emma's special day. At 10 o'clock sharp, the ceremony began. 8 members of the Queen's Guard, resplendent in their scarlet tunics and towering bearskin hats, marched in perfect formation into the hospital courtyard. The sound of their synchronized steps echoed off the building walls, creating a rhythm that seemed to match the beating hearts of everyone watching. Emma, positioned at a specially prepared window seat, gasped with wonder at the magnificent sight. Colonel Harrison, leading the procession, called out commands in the traditional manner. The guards performed their ceremonial duties with the same precision they displayed at Buckingham Palace. They executed the changing of the guard ceremony flawlessly, with every movement sharp and purposeful. The crowd of staff, patients' families, and community members who had gathered watched in respectful silence, understanding they were witnessing something truly extraordinary. Emma's eyes never left the guards as they performed their ancient ritual. She whispered questions to her father about each movement, each command, each tradition. Michael, who had spent hours researching royal ceremonies to answer his daughter's endless questions, explained everything in quiet tones. The guards' dedication to performing this ceremony with full honors, despite being far from their usual post, moved everyone present. The military band, specially brought in for the occasion, played traditional ceremonial music. The stirring melodies filled the air and seemed to give the entire event an otherworldly quality. When they played God Save the King, Emma placed her small hand over her heart, having learned the proper protocol from the books she had studied. Her serious expression and perfect posture showed how deeply she understood the significance of the moment. Halfway through the ceremony, Colonel Harrison broke from tradition. He approached Emma's viewing area and presented her with a special gift: honorary membership in the Queen's Guard, complete with a miniature uniform and official documentation. Emma's hands trembled as she accepted the tiny red coat and matching hat. The crowd erupted in gentle applause, and even the stoic guards smiled at the little girl's joy. But the most moving moment came when Emma was invited to participate in the ceremony. With Dr. Reynolds's careful approval, Emma was wheeled out in her hospital bed, specially decorated for the occasion. The guards formed an honor corridor, and Emma, wearing her miniature guard hat, was given the privilege of inspecting the troops alongside Colonel Harrison. Each guard stood perfectly still as Emma slowly passed by, but their eyes showed warmth and respect for the brave little girl. She stopped at each position, studying their uniforms and ceremonial weapons with the intense curiosity that had always defined her personality. When she reached the end of the line, she turned to Colonel Harrison and declared in her small but clear voice, "They are the bravest and most handsome guards I have ever seen." The ceremony concluded with a special presentation. A representative from the royal household, who had traveled specifically for this event, presented Emma with a personal letter from members of the royal family, acknowledging her courage and expressing their hope that the ceremony brought her joy. The letter, written on official palace stationery, praised Emma for her bravery and strength, calling her an inspiration to everyone who had heard her story. As the guards prepared to depart, Emma asked if she could speak to them. In a voice that carried surprising strength, she thanked each guard personally, telling them they had made her dream come true. Several of the guards, trained to maintain composure in all situations, found themselves fighting back tears as they listened to this extraordinary child express her gratitude. The entire ceremony lasted just over an hour, but its impact would last forever. Emma had experienced something no other civilian had ever witnessed: a full royal ceremony performed solely for her benefit. The guards who had served in many official ceremonies later said that Emma's ceremony was one of the most meaningful of their careers. The hours following the ceremony were filled with an energy that seemed to radiate throughout the entire hospital. Emma, exhausted but glowing with happiness, couldn't stop talking about every detail she had witnessed. She clutched her honorary guard certificate and miniature uniform like precious treasures, insisting they stay on her bedside table where she could see them at all times. Nurses who had cared for Emma throughout her illness marveled at the transformation they saw in her. The quiet, often withdrawn child had been replaced by an animated little girl who wanted to share her experience with everyone. She asked the staff to help her write thank you letters to each guard, dictating her thoughts while Sarah wrote them down in careful handwriting. The story of Emma's ceremony spread rapidly across social media and news networks. Videos of the brave little girl inspecting the honor guard went viral, touching hearts around the world. Messages poured in from military personnel stationed in different countries, all expressing their admiration for Emma's courage and the guards who had made her dream possible. The hashtag #DarkEmmasGuards began trending globally as people shared their own stories of overcoming challenges. Colonel Harrison, who had returned to his regular duties in London, couldn't stop thinking about the remarkable child he had met. That evening, he called the hospital to check on Emma's condition and was delighted to learn that she was having her best day in weeks. The ceremony had given her a renewed sense of purpose and joy that surprised even her medical team. 3 days after the ceremony, Emma received an unexpected visitor. Sergeant Michael Torres, one of the guards who had participated in her ceremony, had requested special leave to return to the hospital. He arrived carrying a carefully wrapped package and wearing civilian clothes, looking much younger than he had in his formal uniform. Emma's face lit up when she recognized him. "You're my guard," she exclaimed, reaching out to take his hand. Sergeant Torres knelt beside her bed and presented his gift, a detailed scrapbook documenting the entire ceremony, complete with professional photographs that captured every moment. Each page was carefully designed to tell the story of her special day. The scrapbook revealed something Emma's family hadn't known. The guards had been just as moved by the experience as she had been. Several had written personal messages to Emma, sharing how much her courage had inspired them. Sergeant Torres explained that the guards had all volunteered for the ceremony, competing for the honor of participating in something so meaningful. "Emma," he said gently, "you taught us something important. We spend our time protecting palaces and royal ceremonies, but watching your bravery reminded us what we're really protecting. People like you who face their challenges with such grace and strength." Emma listened intently, understanding that she had somehow given something back to these brave men who had given her such joy. As word spread about Sergeant Torres's return visit, other guards began reaching out to the hospital. They sent videos, messages, photos from their regular duties, and small gifts that would help Emma feel connected to their world. A tradition began where guards would dedicate their daily ceremonies to Emma, carrying her memory and inspiration with them as they performed their duties. Dr. Reynolds observed changes in Emma that went beyond just improved mood. The excitement and purpose surrounding her ceremony seemed to have strengthened her in ways that medicine couldn't explain. While her physical condition remained serious, her energy levels improved and she experienced fewer difficult days than expected. The medical staff began referring to it as the Emma effect, the power of fulfilled dreams to impact healing. Emma's story inspired the hospital to create a new program. Working with local military organizations, they established an initiative to bring ceremonial visits to other seriously ill children. Emma, despite her own condition, became enthusiastic about helping other children experience similar joy. She insisted on helping plan future visits, offering advice about what would make other children happiest. The little girl who had started with a simple wish to see palace guards had become the center of a movement of kindness. Her hospital room became a gathering place where staff members would stop by just to talk with her about their day. Other patients' families sought her out, finding comfort in her peaceful acceptance and infectious optimism. Emma's parents watched these developments with amazement and gratitude. Their daughter, facing the end of her life, had somehow found a way to spread light and hope to everyone around her. The ceremony had been meant to fulfill Emma's dream, but it had ended up touching hundreds of lives in ways no one had anticipated. One evening, as Sarah was reading to Emma before bedtime, her daughter made an observation that would stay with the family forever. "Mommy," she said thoughtfully, "I think the guards didn't just come to make my wish come true. I think they came because God wanted them to learn something too. Sometimes when we help others, we help ourselves in ways we don't expect." 2 weeks after the ceremony, Emma's condition began to decline more rapidly. The burst of energy and joy that had sustained her since meeting the guards gradually faded as her small body grew weaker. Dr. Reynolds gently prepared the family for what was coming. But Emma seemed to understand without being told. She had an intuitive wisdom about her situation that continued to amaze everyone around her. Despite her weakening state, Emma remained focused on others. She asked her parents to make sure all the guards knew how grateful she was, and insisted on recording video messages for them. In her soft voice, she thanked each one personally, telling them they would always be her heroes. These messages, later shared with military units worldwide, became treasured reminders of the impact their service could have on individual lives. Colonel Harrison made several more visits to see Emma, always in civilian clothes so as not to cause a stir in the hospital. During these quiet conversations, Emma shared her thoughts about courage, duty, and what it meant to serve others. The experienced military officer found himself learning from an 8-year-old girl who faced each day with more bravery than many soldiers he had known. Emma's room had become a shrine to her experience with the guards. The walls were covered with photographs from the ceremony, letters from military personnel around the world, and drawings sent by school children who had been inspired by her story. Her miniature guard uniform was displayed on a special stand where she could see it from her bed, and she wore her tiny guard hat whenever she felt strong enough to sit up. As her energy waned, Emma spent more time sleeping, but her impact on the hospital continued to grow. The nursing staff noticed that other young patients seemed calmer and braver after visiting with Emma. She had developed a gift for listening to their fears and helping them find strength. Even in her weakened state, she continued to be a source of light for those around her. The guards who had participated in Emma's ceremony stayed in regular contact with the family. They had formed a special bond with the little girl and couldn't bear the thought of her feeling forgotten. They organized a rotating schedule to ensure Emma received cards and small gifts regularly. Each package was carefully chosen to bring joy without overwhelming her diminished strength. One particularly touching gesture came from the entire Queen's Guard regiment. They created a special photo album showing Emma's influence on their daily duties. Pictures showed guards dedicating their ceremonies to her, carrying her memory as they performed their ancient rituals. The album included a formal letter stating that Emma Williams had been granted the honorary title of Guardian Angel of the Queen's Guard. Emma's parents struggled with their own emotions as they watched their daughter's peaceful preparation for death. She spoke openly about going to heaven and asked them to promise they would stay in touch with all the wonderful people who had become part of their lives through her wish. She was particularly concerned about the guards, wanting to make sure they knew how much they had meant to her. The hospital chaplain, Reverend Margaret Thompson, spent increasing amounts of time with Emma and her family. She was struck by the child's mature understanding of her situation and her concern for others even as she faced her own mortality. Emma asked thoughtful questions about heaven and whether she would be able to watch over the people she loved from there. During one of their conversations, Emma expressed worry about her parents and how they would cope after she was gone. With remarkable insight for someone so young, she asked Reverend Thompson to help her create special messages for her parents to receive after her death. She wanted to leave them with reminders of love and encouragement for the difficult times ahead. The local community had not forgotten Emma either. The mayor announced plans for a permanent memorial garden at the hospital, dedicated to Emma and inspired by her story of courage and the kindness it had generated. Local businesses contributed funds and materials, while schoolchildren designed elements that would make the garden a place of peace and inspiration for future patients and families. Media outlets that had covered Emma's ceremony continued to follow her story, but always with respect for the family's privacy. The focus remained on the positive impact she had created, rather than on her declining health. Her story had become a symbol of how individual acts of kindness could ripple outward to touch countless lives. As Emma grew weaker, she made one final request. She wanted to wear her miniature guard uniform one more time and have her picture taken for the guards who had become so dear to her. The photograph, showing Emma in her tiny red coat and bearskin hat with a peaceful smile on her face, would later become one of the most treasured possessions of every guard who had participated in her ceremony. 3 days before Emma passed away, Colonel Harrison visited her one last time. She was very weak but still alert enough to recognize him. He sat beside her bed and told her something that made her smile despite her exhaustion. The Queen herself had heard Emma's story and wanted the little girl to know she was proud of her courage and the joy she had brought to so many people. Emma Williams passed away peacefully on a quiet Tuesday morning, surrounded by her loving parents and the hospital staff who had become like family to her. Dr. Reynolds, who had cared for many terminally ill children during her career, said she had never seen anyone face death with such grace and serenity. Emma's final words to her parents were simple but profound. "Thank you for helping me meet my brave guards. Tell them I'll watch over them now." The news of Emma's passing spread quickly through the networks of people who had been touched by her story. At military bases around the world, guards observed a moment of silence in her honor. The Queen's Guard at Buckingham Palace dedicated their morning ceremony to Emma's memory, and Colonel Harrison announced that she would forever be remembered as an honorary member of their regiment. Emma's funeral was unlike anything the small town had ever seen. Representatives from the royal household attended, along with several of the guards who had participated in her ceremony. Military personnel from various branches of service came to pay their respects to the little girl, who had reminded them of the deeper meaning behind their duties. The church was filled to capacity, with many more people gathering outside to honor Emma's memory. Sergeant Torres, speaking on behalf of all the guards, delivered a eulogy that brought the entire congregation to tears. He spoke about how Emma had taught them that true courage wasn't about facing an enemy in battle, but about facing life's greatest challenges with hope, kindness, and concern for others. He announced that the guards would carry Emma's memory with them in every ceremony they performed for the rest of their careers. In the months that followed, Emma's impact continued to grow. The hospital's new program, bringing military ceremonies to seriously ill children, was formally named the Emma Williams Foundation. Her story became required reading at military academies, used to teach future officers about service, compassion, and the importance of understanding the lives they protect. The memorial garden dedicated to Emma became a place of pilgrimage for families dealing with childhood illness. Designed around themes of courage and hope, it featured a bronze statue of Emma wearing her miniature guard uniform, surrounded by flowers that bloomed year-round. A plaque at the base carried her words, "Sometimes when we help others, we help ourselves in ways we don't expect." Sarah and Michael Williams, though devastated by their loss, found purpose in continuing Emma's legacy. They established a charity that granted wishes for terminally ill children, while also supporting their families through the grieving process. The first wish they granted was for a little boy who wanted to meet firefighters, and it became clear that Emma's spirit of bringing joy to others would continue through their work. The guards who had known Emma stayed in touch with her parents, visiting on her birthday and the anniversary of her ceremony. They shared stories about how Emma's memory continued to inspire them in their daily duties. Many reported that they thought of her during difficult moments, drawing strength from the example she had set in facing her own challenges. Colonel Harrison, who had been personally changed by his relationship with Emma, established an annual award in her name. The Emma Williams Award for Exceptional Courage was given to individuals who demonstrated extraordinary bravery while facing personal adversity. Recipients included other sick children, military personnel who had overcome challenges, and ordinary citizens who showed remarkable strength in difficult circumstances. Emma's story was eventually published as a children's book, with all proceeds going to the Emma Williams Foundation. The book became a bestseller, introducing Emma's message of courage and kindness to children around the world. Many schools incorporated her story into their character education programs, using Emma as an example of how young people could make a positive difference regardless of their circumstances. 5 years after Emma's death, the Queen's Guard unveiled a permanent memorial at their headquarters. A small plaque placed near the guardhouse simply read, "In memory of Emma Williams, age 8, honorary guardian angel of the Queen's Guard. Her courage reminds us daily why we serve." New guards were told Emma's story during their training, ensuring that her legacy would continue to inspire future generations. The ripple effects of one little girl's simple wish had transformed into a movement that touched thousands of lives. Emma's dream of seeing palace guards had evolved into something far greater, a lasting reminder that individual acts of kindness, no matter how small they might seem, have the power to change the world. Her story proved that heroes come in all sizes, and sometimes the smallest among us can teach the greatest lessons about love, courage, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Emma Williams had wanted to see brave guards, never realizing that in the end, she would become the bravest guard of all, watching over everyone whose lives she had touched with her extraordinary light.